Exercise is called lying supine, foot circles, stroke, point flex. Bit of a mouthful, but you'll understand why. By virtue of the exercise foot circles, it is a lower leg, specifically a lower leg exercise, but generally classed as a lower body exercise. And lying supine means you're going to be lying down on your back with your legs long. For most of you, even lying down on the ground with your legs long will probably mean that you can't keep your shoulders and your sacrum and your head down on the floor in neutral plane. Some of you might find you flare the ribs. Some of you might find it gets into your lower back. Some of you might find like your chin sort of juts up. So I suggest you use a sort of cushion under your head. And for the setup of this exercise, you keep one leg completely long along the floor, and you will bend the other knee and interlace your hands towards the groin line or the lower part of your hamstring. Interlacing the hands, if that's quite uncomfortable for you, you've got heavily rounded shoulders and your hands don't get as low as mine, you can certainly have them a little bit higher. The goal is for you to just try and relax your shoulders. The leg that's bent, you can see here, is 90 degrees. So my ankle isn't higher than my knee, but it's also not lower than my knee. A nice 90-degree position there. And then you'll notice for some of you, as you lie in this position, that leg that's long along the floor will kind of feel like it's dropping out, or it's a little bit loosey-goosey. So to prevent that from happening, what you're going to simply do is use the assistance of a block on the highest setting and put it just outside your left ankle, the left ankle bone. So you probably need to adjust it as you lie down. The leg will rise in height, and then take your setup again. And what you will start by doing here is relaxing your pelvis, your thigh muscles, relaxing the shoulders, the neck, and from here you will start to point the foot. So this is plantar flexion and flex. This is dorsiflexion. Point the foot, flex the foot, and you'll do 20 of those. Then once you've finished the point flex part, you will start to circle just your ankle in one direction. So I start with anti-clockwise here. No preference really, you've just got to make sure that you do 20 in one direction, not moving the whole leg, and we're not moving the knee either. So we're just trying to isolate this movement into the lower leg, specifically from the ankle. Once you've done 20 in that direction, you're doing 20 in the opposite direction. Be really sort of conscientious about drawing big circles and getting as much range of motion in the foot, in the point, and the flex as you can. You will do that equally on both sides. This is called the hook lying abductor press. There are two variations of how you can do this exercise. One is an isometric hold, which means it's a time-based exercise. And the second variation is a repetition-based exercise. I'll demonstrate the press first, because that's the one that I normally prescribe to most of my clients and the one that I use the most. But also I will, after I've done that version, demonstrate the repetition-based version as well. For this exercise, you're going to need a strap, a yoga strap. This is not a banded TheraBand or sort of elastic band. This is a taut band, and you can see here it's designed to give you stability and enforce the pelvic, shoulder, and lower leg reconfiguration in this E-size. So what we're going to do from here is, first and foremost, you're coming into a hook lying position. Hook lying means you're coming down onto your back, lying down on the floor, and you are bending your knees to be able to lie down in a comfortable position with the back of the head to the floor. If the back of your head doesn't touch the floor, please don't worry about that. I will give you a sort of adjustment in just a moment. But the most important part of this exercise first is to lie down on your back with your feet hip distance apart. So go back to your fundamentals, understand what it means to have your feet hip distance apart. Basically not wider than the two sort of points here of your hip bones. And then the second thing you want to sort of ensure is that your heels are not touching the back of the thighs. If you rock your knees very gently side to side without lifting your feet off the floor, you'll notice that your pelvis is very unstable and rocks off from the sides of each of your back of the PSIS bones, which is the back of the two sacral bones here. Equally, if you have your feet too far away, you probably won't be able to feel all of your 10 toes and the sort of balls of your feet ground down to the floor. And also in that position, you're establishing and starting off the E-size in a very unstable pelvic position. So ideally what you want to do is find the halfway point between those two extremes, heels to the back of the thighs, feet a little bit further away, and then come into the position which is the halfway point of those two extreme positions. When you rock your your knees in that position, you will find it very difficult to lift the two sides of your sacral points off the floor, and you'll feel a lot more grounded and stable in your pelvis. So, in this hook lying position, you're then going to grab your strap and place it just around the sort of almost the midpoint of your thighs, not too sort of close up towards the knee line and not too sort of far down towards your IT band line or your groin line. So a little bit more sort of towards the upper thigh and hip distance again, so that when you pull the thighs into the strap, which is the move of abduction, you are not enabling the knees or your ankles to roll out or to sort of be pulled wider than a hip distance position. Okay, so feet grounded, find all 10 toes pressured down into the floor. There should be a sort of pressure of your triangle points of the soles of the feet into the ground, which are your big toes, your pinky toes, and the points underneath your heels pressing down into the ground. Once you're here, all I want you to do is now establish whether you need to put a block or a thin sort of cushion underneath the skull of your head. If you find your shoulders kind of roll off the floor, your chin sort of lifts up towards the ceiling, and you find it very difficult to establish your shoulders down to the floor and your head to the floor, then I'm going to suggest you use a really thin sort of foam pad like I'm using here, or a very thin cushion just to place underneath your skull. And you'll see there that then it allows my rib cage, very importantly, to sit in a very nice neutral position. My pelvis sits in a nice neutral position to the floor, and also there's an ease and a neutrality in my cervical spine and my neck that then allows this exercise to release tension in my upper body and restore the curvature naturally in my neck as well. Then with our arms, we're going to place them in a 45-degree position away from the side of the body. And the cue that I often give my clients here to really feel the forearms releasing and the shoulder blades repositioning and the shoulders dropping back towards the ground is you want to feel the fingernail beds pushing down into the floor. Fingers are wide, and you push very gently without lifting up into the wrists or lifting the wrists off the floor. This is your hook lying abductor press, and for a constant 6 minutes, maybe even 5, depending on the prescription of this exercise for you, you are simply pulling the thighs into the straps, so outwards, and you're relaxing your abdominals as well as your hip flexors as you do this. Now this part is quite hard for most people. You'll find like maybe you want to squeeze your pelvic floor muscles, your rib cage gets involved, you hold a lot of tension in your spine. You want to be able to feel like you are generating this movement from the outside of your knee line and the outside of your thighs, as you then relax and feel like there's some space in your pelvic floor as you hold that press. If you've been given a repetition-based variation of this exercise, all you're doing is releasing the strap and then pulling the strap. You're releasing the strap and pulling the strap. And you are at the same time not rocking the feet or inwardly or outwardly rotating your feet. And you're not also holding tension in your abdominals as you release and pull. So those are the two variations of a hook lying abductor press. This exercise is called sitting heel raises, and it's a lower body exercise which you're going to require to do in a seated position, for which you'll need your chair, your box or your stool, a cushion, and a setup that allows your ankles to sit right below the knees and your knees in line with your hips and your body, your lower body, in a 90-degree position. For this exercise, think of your functional test of sitting in extension. You're going to gently place the cushion between your inner knees, not between the thighs, but between the inner knees. Relax your abdominals and extend the spine. So you're going to roll the pelvis forwards and sit onto your front sit bones. Press the feet down gently into the floor. I'm using blocks just simply because my feet need to be elevated. And you're compressing the cushion just to a point where it doesn't sort of just slip out of your knees, but also if somebody walked by, they can't just sort of pull the cushion out from the knees. Okay, so there's some firm compression. Feet are hip distance apart, palms on the thighs, shoulders pinned back slightly, palms up. Your gaze is eye level so that we're not dropping the head or extending the head. And then from here, what you're trying to do is using the balls of your feet to push down, you're going to simultaneously lift your heels up. Now, what some of you might be tempted to do is roll your ankles outwards, meaning the big toes will feel a bit loosey-goosey. Conversely, some of you might kind of collapse in your arches, which means you're using more of the big toes than the pinky toes, and your pinky toes will feel like they're coming up. So you've got to have command of all 10 toes down into the box or the floor as you lift the heels. And as you lift the heels, you're not propelling your body forwards or backwards. You've got to keep the sort of sternum stacked above the pubic bone and your abdominals relaxed. And then you lower and lift. And if you watch closely, as I'm lowering, I feel like there's a little bit of a slower motion in my left ankle than my right. And what that's telling me is that this disparity in my ankle function between left and right is also causing some difference in how I can flex into my hips different. And it's therefore also causing my calf muscles to work a bit different and my hamstrings to work different on both sides. So this is something I'm very, very aware of, and it gives me a bit of insight as to what's possibly always causing my left QL to be a bit caught sometimes if I'm not regular with my posture work. The right side of my neck to feel like it's a little bit out. So the dysfunctions always show in different ways, but because my ankles and my feet function differently, it then causes a disparity in my pelvis, which means both the muscles either side of my legs work different. So this exercise is designed to restore that function equally in the muscles that are responsible for extension in the body. So think of all the muscles in the back side of your body, shoulders, lower back muscles, all the muscles down your spine, your glutes, hamstrings, calves, lower calves, and the soles of your feet. And then we're just lifting and lowering. This is sitting heel raises. This exercise is called static wall with block. You're going to need the use of a wall, you're going to need your block and a foam pad, a cushion or a block underneath your head. And what you're going to do is you're going to lie with your legs up to the wall and with your bottom about a foot away from the wall. So your bottom isn't necessarily sort of touching the wall. And you're just going to come and lie down on your back in this position. So my bottom is about a foot to 1/2 foot away from the wall. That's also to encourage the extension of your knees. I've got a foam pad just underneath my head. And then what I'm going to do here is I'm going to place a block lengthways. You can see here I'm sort of compressing the 2 long edges of the block between my ankle bones and my big toes, like so. And then what I'm going to do is, with my arms in a 45-degree position, my fingers are wide, I'm going to spread the toes and I'm going to compress that block as I bring the feet into flexion. Flexion means you're drawing the toes towards you, and you want to sort of feel like you've got a tray sort of on the soles of your feet. You're not bending your knees, and you're trying really hard to stay with the compression of the block for the entire duration of this exercise. And you're just going to breathe. So you should feel a great amount of work happening in your quads, your thighs, certainly the lower legs towards the ankles, your shins, and the sort of soles of your feet. Head and neck are relaxed, and you're just breathing here. That is your static wall with a block. This exercise is called wall frog. It's one of the many variations of frog that you can do. And for me personally, it's one of my favorite variations, simply because it doesn't just work the inner thighs, but it also gets me into my hips, my lower legs, and therefore helps me open up my shoulders and release any tension I may have in my neck. For wall frog, you're going to need a wall. You're going to also need a cushion or a foam pad for underneath your head. And this setup here is simply to demonstrate to you what a wall would basically look like, or for me to be able to use a wall for the purposes of demoing the video from a side on. Okay, so what you're going to do for this exercise is you're going to come lie down on your back. And the number one sort of setup anomaly, I'm not going to call it a mistake, I'm going to call it an anomaly that I see, is people kind of put their bottom too close to the wall. And in doing so, what that will instantly sort of promote is the sort of rib flare, the popping of the ribs, and this massive gap in the lower back. So the first thing you're going to be aware of, and you're going to have to maneuver based on your ability to externally rotate the hips, which is basically take your knees wide, but also the ability of your feet and your ankles, is you're going to have to judge how far away from the wall you can be. So for me here, I can get a little bit closer. You can see here I'm maybe just about a foot away from the wall in front of me. And what you're going to do for wall frog is, to the best of your ability, you're going to bring both of your feet together and try and Velcro each of your 10 toes together, the toe mounds and the heels together. The exercise is actually largely, 99% of it is driven by squeezing your feet together, by pressing the soles of the feet together. And most of us, when we put our feet in this position, we find it extremely difficult to let go of all the tension in our inner thighs. So what this exercise is actually helping us do is use our feet, restore function in the ankles and in the lower legs to allow us to relax the abdominals, as well as relax the inner thighs and our hips, to promote an external rotation in our hips, which will help us reposition our pelvis. And we're going to hold here for the duration of the exercise. But if you, like me, want to make this a little bit more intense and a little bit more lower body driven, you simply take your feet higher than the line of your knees, which is what I'm going to ask most of you to do to start with, because simply by bringing the feet lower, what you'll find is that your feet separate and you put the compromise in the rib cage by being sort of arched in the lower back. So bring the feet high. Squeeze the soles of the feet together, allow the hips and the knees to drop out. Palms are open, arms 45 degrees. Relaxing every single muscle in the body except the soles of the feet. And what you'll find is for the first minute, the sort of battle is between the inner thighs, the hips, and the soles of the feet. But after a while, as you breathe, you start to sort of put the function into the lower legs, the ankles, the feet, and allow the hips to just drop out. This is called wall frog. Exercise is called sitting floor with block. You're going to need to come and sit on the floor with your back and your bottom really shoved up against the wall. This position itself is challenging for a lot of people because it's not allowing you to compromise in your knee or your ankle load. And by virtue of you having to stick your bum right up against the wall, it's really going to test what we call the dynamic tension in your body, which means the front and your back side of the body. For many people, even just sitting like this, you'll notice that maybe your knees come up off the ground and you'll find it difficult to extend your legs. Or if you try and extend the legs, you're going to need to sort of compromise in your upper body. And many of you will find it really hard to keep your shoulders and your head back to the wall. But don't worry, the whole exercise is designed to restore that function. So first, what you're going to do is keep a block the highest setting, and you're going to straddle the block between your ankles and your big toes. For many of you, that's going to be a struggle to start with. Don't worry if it's not perfect. Mine's by all means never perfect, because my left foot is very different to my right. And you're going to simply just start off by trying to compress that block between the ankle bones and your toes, and then keep your palms up, facing forwards and upwards on your thighs. Now, if for many of you it's hard to keep the palms up without sort of crouching forwards like so, what you're going to need to do, and this is just a recommendation, you're going to place 2 blocks just outside the sort of line of your IT band towards the sort of halfway point of your thighs, in a position that allows you then to rest the palms to the sides of your thighs, and you'll notice that it feels a bit more comfortable and it feels like you're being able to sort of sit tall and with your shoulders back. You're going to hold this position, actively pulling the feet towards you. As you compress the block, there's lots happening in my legs right now, and you're simply trying to relax your abdominals and let the position of the exercise extend into your mid and your upper back. This is sitting floor with block. This exercise is called the spread foot forward fold. So you are going to possibly need some blocks handy, just in case you struggle to get your hands to the floor. So for spread foot forward fold, you are going to start by standing in a straddle position. As you take this position, the first question I get asked is, how wide do I take my legs? Well, that will depend first on your capabilities, but also what you don't want is just a sort of passive kind of dumping down in your hips. So for me, as I stand with my legs wide, I've got to be able to feel like I'm contracting my quad muscles and feeling the outer hip muscles activate and the inner muscles stretch straight away. So this exercise is, as you can tell, just by taking your straddle position in this wide leg angle, it's working into your feet, it's working the leg muscles, but particularly it is working the inner and outer thigh muscles already. Then from here, what you want to be able to do as you take your wide straddle position is bring your hands down to the floor. The reason I've changed my position to demo this on the side view is because what most of you will start by doing is pushing your bum backwards. Prevent yourself from pushing your bum backwards. Bring your hands down to the ground as you roll the pelvis forwards and over. And bring your hands underneath your shoulders. Try not to have them too far underneath or too far away. Hands underneath your shoulders. You will round your back as you bring your head down to the ground. And if you are in a position where you can take your legs wider, then do so. Spread the fingers wide and you hold this initial position for 30 seconds to 1 minute. No grabbing of the toes. Try not to evert the feet. And if you find it difficult to bring your hands to the ground, you simply take a pair of blocks on whichever setting you need to for your sort of range of motion. So I've got blocks here on the lowest setting, and I'm holding. If you're slightly more advanced, perhaps you can bring your forearms down and see how I don't take my bottom behind my ankle line. I am constantly trying to bring my body weight forwards as I breathe. Then for the second position of your spread foot forward fold, legs again in straddle. From your centered position, you will walk your hands over to the right side about 45 degrees. Left palm will stack above your right, so fingers are now facing sort of in a diagonal to the right side, and you simply push the hands into the ground without turning your hips and your torso over to the other side. So you can see here my hips stay facing forwards. My left arm is reaching, so I'm getting a really nice sort of lengthening in the side of my body there, left side, and I stay here and I hold. As you get more advanced, you can of course bend your elbows and breathe. And then you will switch sides rather. So left palm is facing 45 degrees, right palm will stack on top, and we go down again. By all means, you are using a block under your hands if it's too difficult for you to get the hands across in this position. For your last and fourth position, you come back into center, hands underneath the shoulders, or forearms down, and you breathe. That is your spread foot forward fold.